Afternoon. Called to order the meeting of our November 23rd Regional Planning Commission. This time, Steve Sandlin will lead us in prayer and the pledge. Thank you, Steve.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings you have given us. Father, we thank you for this time of the year where we're giving thanks officially all across the nation. Father, be with all of our troops and everyone that's fighting for our free country. Dear Heavenly Father, be with this planning commission as we conduct business today, that we do it in a manner pleasing to Thee. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carol, call the roll, please.
Rhonda Allen. Richie Boland.
Here.
Veronica Buchanan.
Here.
Gary Farley.
Here.
Will Jordan.
Here.
Mike Cush.
Here.
Steve Sandlin.
Here.
Mike Vaught.
Here.
Vincent Windrow.
Here.
Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. This time we need to either approve or adjust the minutes for our October meeting, and I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Withdrawals or deferred?
Nothing withdrawn or deferred, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'm sure you
At this time, I'd kind of like to recognize a newest member of our Planning Commission, Mr. Vincent Windrow. Vincent, it's good to have you aboard.
Thank you very much. It's
And
good to be
as
here.
we get into today, grab a hold of your seat because we're going to move. Welcome aboard. Feel free to stop us if we're not making sense to you, and we'll try our best to kind of bring you up to speed as to where we are and what we're doing. But welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Look forward to working with you. Waiver request. Under item 7A, William Fisher, fire hydrant, waiver 094015.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is a waiver request for a piece of property at 7201 Jackson Ridge Road. They are requesting a waiver from the subdivision regulation requirement that requires fire hydrants within 1,000 feet of all subdivision lots. You have a copy of the comments in your agenda packets. The property, again, is located along Jackson Ridge Road, which is just to the east of the intersection of Jackson Ridge and Tyler Roads. The proposed parcel that the applicant is wanting to subdivide off the tract is about 2.5 acres of an existing 25-acre tract. Since the parcel is less than 5 acres in size, they will need to abide by the subdivision regulations and have a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet of the property. However, information provided by Consolidated Utility District indicates that while there is a 4-inch line in front of the property, it is not adequate to support a fire hydrant. It is good for for domestic pressure, but not good for the fire pressures that would be needed. So, and there is correspondence from CUD in the packet as well. Therefore, the applicant is asking for a waiver to this provision. The applicant is present, and either one of us will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
If there's not sufficient water flow, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Ready for a vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Request is granted. Item number 8, plat and bond extensions. It looks like we have 3 bond extensions, 1 plat extension, and I don't see anything wrong with taking all these at the same time. Do you?
That'd be fine, Mr. Chairman.
Item A is 12 Corners, Section 3, for 1 year, and that's the plat extension. Item B is Cascade Falls, Section 2, and that's for 1 year bond extension. Item C is Stonewood, Section 2, 1 year bond extension. Item D is Harrison Glen, Section 4, 1 year bond extension. Only question that comes to my mind, is this the first extension that they've all requested?
As far as the 12 Corners, the plat extension is concerned, it seems to me that they had one other one about a year or so ago. But other than that, the bonds, Mr. Sullivan, are you?
That's what
that was the only one I think that I remember them coming through with that.
Mhm.
All the others, most of them are just with the economic downturn. That's why we reviewed those, and that's the request, the reason for the request.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve all items under Section 8. Any other discussion?
Can I just got one question on, I noticed a couple of them have got just the reason extension needed is not topped. Is the build outs done, or is there a reason why it's not topped?
Typically, when they don't top them till they get a certain percentage of the lots built out, so that's what they don't want to have to go back in and replace that top coat. So that's the reason why.
Good question, Richie. Anybody else? Ready for the vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Motion carries.
Jeff, I got a question for Doug. Is there any limit to the amount of time we can extend a plat?
The subdivision regulations don't put any kind of a limit on it, as long as they keep coming back for extensions.
As long as they
there's-
keep extending it.
right.
And they met the criteria that was in place at that time.
Correct. So now that may be something in the future that we look at, possibly. We've put something in there regarding rezoning applications in our bylaws about only deferring so many times, but this is a little different. So typically with these situations, like Todd had said, a lot of the times it's for economic reasons is why.
I can see this going on for a long time. Do you see any downside as a planner to us keep extending them as long as they've met the criteria at that time?
Generally speaking, no. However, there may be times, like for instance, when we're getting ready after the comprehensive plan is done to completely amend our regulations, and there may be different regs that come out of that. The only downfall I would see at that point is, if what we're requiring with the new regulations is that much different from what we required in the old regulations, that there may be some conflict. But there's not that many that we issue, that we have the extensions to that many times. So, hopefully when the market starts picking back up, that these will start moving. So.
That's the reason I was asking.
Anything else? Item number 9, submitted for preliminary approval, River Birch Estates, 9-1002.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, River Birch Estates preliminary plat located off of Roy Arnold Road. It's about 40 acres, 14 lots. The developer is Mr. Harding Fox. The engineer is SEC. And with that, I'll turn it over to our engineer, Mr. Todd Sullivan.
Yes, on this, we did have a couple of comments with the drainage. The engineer did meet those. They do meet our regs. We had some questions with the pre and post numbers, but the engineer was able to work that out to where the pre and post numbers do work now.
On the note on the front, floodplain note, no portion of this lies within the Zone X 100-year floodplain per the plan. That was in January the 5th of 07. Has anything changed since then?
Those are the most current maps. There are a few panels that did change to October of 08, I believe, but or 07. It was 08, but this wasn't one of them. So that's the most recent we have.
Let's do it first and see it all.
These are all fairly large lots. Questions?
I move we approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And the motion carries. Thank you. Item 11, submitted for site plan review. Bethlehem Church of Christ.
I think you forgot
09.
you forgot the final. You skipped the final one.
I didn't. I'm sorry. Colonial Estates,
Yes.
isn't it? I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Item number 10, submitted for final approval. Item B, Colonial Estates, Section 12, Phase 1B, 09-2044.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Again, Colonial Estates, Section 12, Phase 1B, final plat located off of Laurel Lane. It's 14 lots on just a little over 6 acres. Developer is BC Developers, LLC. Engineer is SEC. Mr. Engineer.
Engineering department has reviewed this, and it does meet all our standards.
Make any changes between the preliminary and the final?
No. It's consistent with the preliminary.
Any discussion? Have a motion? Motion to approve the final for Colonial Estates, Section 12, Phase 1B. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you, the motion carries. Now, site plan review. This is item 11 on our agenda. A is Bethlehem Church of Christ, 09-3017.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Lynch. This is an existing church located at the corner of Las Casas and Pitts Road. They're proposing to build a 4,565 square foot pavilion, which will be open at this time, but in the future they plan on enclosing it and making it, I believe, classroom space. There were several comments on the site plan. They have addressed most of them. They'll still need to add the utility certificates and show the soil areas. That is something that we could do as staff after this meeting. The engineer is present, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does this require a need for any additional parking?
No, it would not, because our parking standards are based on auditorium seats in a church, and they're not adding new auditorium space.
Other questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. And a second? Thank you, Richard. Any further discussion? Other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Item number B, Joe's Mini Market, 09-3023.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this is Joe's Mini Market located on Couchville Pike. Planning Commission members will recall this application by Mr. Charles Eady within the last few months. Came through for a conditional use permit to use the existing building as a convenience market. Basically what he's wanting to do is demolish the existing building, which is about 900 square feet roughly, and replace it with a 1,120 square foot log construction with asphalt shingle roof building. He'd have to add a little more parking. You can see he's actually proposing to add the parking where the existing building was. It's not a change in use, and really the building size isn't changing significantly. Just it's getting a little bigger, but not much. We had a number of comments on this site plan. For the most part, the comments have been addressed. I do think that the applicant could do a little better with the landscaping than shown. We can work with them on that. Also, the rear setback that's shown on the site plan on the lot itself is actually, the rear setback should be 50 feet, not 25. They have it right in the, well, actually, they don't even have it right in the chart either. So the chart would have to be amended to have the rear setback at 50 feet and then just change that on the site plan. But that's not going to affect the development. They still have quite a bit of room in the back. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and the design engineer is present.
New septic system, it appears?
Well, I think they're actually, looks like they're, yes, yeah, they're having a new septic, I'm sorry. Yeah, now it looks like the soils area is about the same.
There's existing right here.
Yeah, there's existing.
What was that building used for?
The original?
Yeah. The one that they're going to tear down?
Well, it was going to be part of the mini market. I mean, that's what it was approved for at the last. Now, before that, it was a
Barbershop.
yeah.
Before that, it was a little mini market again. I mean,
Mr. Eady's father built this building back in, decades ago, and it was a little family community store. And then after his father passed away, they leased the building out for a while, and his mother was living off, or utilizing the rental income. And now the son's taken over, and he's moved back in it, back to the earliest usage just about. So it's been in the same family for a long time.
Zoning's in place.
Yes, it's got the conditional use permit for what they're using it for now. Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to approve contingent upon them meeting staff requirements for the setback and landscape.
Excellent motion. Have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. Agenda item 12, public hearing, subdivision regulation amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. You'll recall at the last day meeting, staff discussed some proposed revisions to the subdivision regulations regarding re-subdivision plats. We have a memo in your agenda packets as well as the proposed amendments as well. Just a real brief overview. The county's current subdivision regulation does contain review criteria for preliminary plats, major final plats, minor finals, condominiums, and also combinations, but there really isn't a section that deals specifically with just re-subdivision plats or shifting of a lot line. We typically handle those as minor final plats, but that can be problematic sometimes because there are some issues we end up running into that really aren't applicable for re-subdivision plats, but we have to because they're minor finals. So what we're proposing is, in light of that, is to add a section that just deals specifically with re-subdivision plats. Again, we have included a copy of the regulations for your review. The biggest change is that there's some of the certificates that are needed for the utilities. We only require those if they're required by the utility company. There may be some situations, for instance, we've run into situations before with subsurface issues with the state. Someone just wanting to shift a lot line, and someone has to go out and redo the septic area for them to sign off on it. However, the state has said that those type of subdivisions really don't qualify under their definitions. So this would give us a little more flexibility in reviewing those type subdivisions. So that's the real reason for the revisions before you today. We've sent a copy of this to the engineering firms in town just for their comment. We didn't really, actually, I don't think we received any comments back from them. I think everybody seemed fine with it. This should give us more flexibility in reviewing those type of plats. So we are required to have a public hearing. This was advertised. The 30-day requirement that is provided in our subdivision regulations was met. And so since this is a subdivision regulation, again, this does not have to go forward to the Board of Commissioners. So you have the authority to approve or deny this. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
This doesn't have to go before the full commission.
That's correct.
Take a couple of minutes to make sure, you guys, if you need to. And we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for subdivision regulation amendment. Anyone here wishing to speak for or against proposed agenda item, re-subdivision provision? No one here? We'll close the public hearing. Back to us.
Doug, one other question. The FEMA, the current FEMA maps now, they're in your office or for review or for questioning
Yes.
anybody in any subdivision or any new, old, existing, whatever, they can come up and ask or look.
Absolutely.
And all that sort of stuff.
Yes, sir.
So this is the I say the new ones, I don't know exactly when the last new ones were. Was that '08 or the beginning of this year? Or something?
Well, yeah, there's some of the panels were reissued for 2008, just a handful. There was a lot more that weren't revised than were. So basically, we're under the maps now that are January of 2007 and October 2008.
Yeah.
So
It just seems like through my business, I don't know whether it's the insurance companies that are being notified or the banks are being notified or something, but some folks that didn't have to have flooders insurance are now having to have flood insurance, and it's caused a little whirlwind out in my area a little bit. I don't know if it has any of y'all's, but and I think it's because of the new FEMA maps and whatever they're doing to get their insurers in compliance or whatever. So.
Yeah, typically, a lot of the times you'll see that happen when someone's trying to do a refinance or something like that. Most of the calls we get at our office stem from that. You know, someone's just trying to do a refi, and next thing you know, they're being told they need flood insurance. It does work the other way sometimes, where you have some that were required to have it, but then the revision took them out. That does happen, but we don't usually get those calls. We get the ones where the people are having to carry it. So.
Questions?
And under 11 is one of the big things that we're changing as far as days from the date of submittal and everything, and the fees paid. And
Well, really, that's actually the same from a minor final. You know, the state does. There are state regulations that require planning commission action for the major plats and the preliminaries, but not so much with just minor plats that aren't required. So this is how we handle that. So it's pretty much pretty much consistent with what the state requires. So, but most minor plats and resubs we look at, you know, we turn those around within a week. So that's usually not an issue.
make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Motion, and need a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Item number B, proposed amendment to Article 20.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The Planning Department's work schedule identified revisions to the sign regulations as one of the projects we would be working on in 2009. While we have been working on that and have made a fairly good amount of progress, we don't anticipate the completion before the end of this year, so we'll carry that over into next year. That being said, we do think that there is an amendment we can make right now that will help clean things up a little bit and give us the time and that we need to finish this project. The current sign regulations list a number of permitted signs in the different zoning categories, and they also create the size and the height requirements and the square footage requirements that they're supposed to have. Specifically, we look at ground signs, wall signs, projecting, graphic, and directional. There are other types of signs and technologies that do exist but are not specifically mentioned in our regulations currently. So with that, what we're proposing to do is add a new section to section 20.02. We would letter that O and just put a little statement in there that says signs which are not expressly permitted in this article are prohibited. That would give us an opportunity to finish crafting the regulations that we're currently working on without having to get to the situation where someone wants a sign that we really don't regulate. So that's basically the intent of this regulation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have with this.
I have a question, Doug, and I don't know if it belongs here or not. But one of the things that I've seen recently, like with the discount beer and tobacco stores, is they've begun trimming their windows out in neon, which is not necessarily a sign, but it just makes me wonder, is there any way or place to regulate the use of neon? Because I could see that becoming extremely offensive.
There is. Actually, I know the city of Murfreesboro ran into several situations with neon when I worked there. Now, I didn't specifically work with signs. That was handled in our codes department at the time. But that is something that we can look at. Now, it's not. We hadn't gotten to that point yet as far as dealing with all the different types of lighting. But you're right, that can be problematic from times. So, but yeah, this would be an appropriate place to look at that.
Doug, are you guys still working on the churches, giving them a variance exemption?
Well, as we work through the regs, we're going to explore that option. One of the, I think what you're referring to is those churches that want lit signs, I guess. Typically those, right now, lighted signs in residential areas for institutional uses, which churches qualify for, is not permitted. So a lot of variance requests seen at the Board of Zoning Appeals do deal with that issue. So that was one of the things that we were planning to take a look at.
Where are we on, it mentions here, technology, changeable copy sign stuff. I mean, I know the city's in the middle of a big mess over and they even have conversations about service stations, all that they can digitally change their price of their fuel. Is this going to disallow that, or because we don't have the article in here that says what is allowed? We just know from what I've got in my hand what.
Basically, yeah, what we're saying is if it doesn't expressly allow it in the sign regulations, it's not permitted, is what we're saying right now, which will give us a time.
Do we allow changeable signs, electronically changeable signs?
They're not. It's not mentioned in our ordinance at all.
Personally, I don't have a problem with Love's Truck Stop out there or something in a rural area. It's got a sign that's up, and they can change that sign instead of having to put a guy on a ladder or a bucket truck up there to change it.
I'm sorry.
And I don't necessarily want to prohibit that sign. So
at this point, all we're doing is whatever is listed right now is permitted. We want to keep permitted, and until we get done with our regulations update.
The way it is right now, we don't expressly prohibit that changeable sign. But if we do this, then we are prohibiting that changeable sign. I mean, it's a whole different conversation with the billboard out here that's changing every 10 seconds. But the guy that goes in there and every other day he can change the price of his gasoline by hitting a keyboard instead of sending a guy up that pole.
Right.
I don't want to prohibit that guy from changing.
Well, the signs that are there, of course, are there.
Yeah.
We're not saying they're basically being non-conforming at that point.
What kind of timetable are we on then as far as having something where, because I hate for somebody to come in next week with an application and we say, you can't have this sign because I'm just one member of this body, but I don't want to prohibit the gas price changing sign, whatever you want to call it, but so
we're hoping at this point early next year, within it's hard to say because signage is a fairly complex issue and there's a lot of different areas that need to be addressed, but we're hoping by spring of 2010 to have the first draft to you, and we'll make sure it's even before that. We'll work as hard as we can to get it to you before that. But it puts, you understand, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, it's difficult on staff to have to try to deal with a sign that there are no regulations for, which is kind of why we're looking at doing it this way.
I've just been sitting here for the last 2 minutes saying I thought of one case that I see could be a problem, and there may be dozens of them, and I hate to, this is kind of a blanket thing right here.
Well, that's what it was intended to be at this point.
I see it could be a little bit problematic, personally.
What happens if the scenario he brings up happens? Someone brings in the application and it has that. Do they go through BZA or do they?
Is there my question is there an appeal process if y'all turn something down?
There is, yes. They can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to challenge my decision, basically.
As long as they've got an appeal process.
Right. I think there is an appeal process for that.
Is there a real need for this right now, though?
Yeah, that's my question. I mean, if you're going to be ready.
Yeah, we wouldn't have brought it to you. I mean, quite frankly, if we didn't think that this might become an issue, we wouldn't have. I mean, I know things are kind of slow right now, but and we haven't seen just a whole lot of sign applications, but we just felt out of an abundance of caution while we're finishing up the project we're working on, we just didn't want something to sneak in under the radar that we couldn't do much about. So, and I guess to answer your question, we think it's important.
And I think as long as they have the appeal process, that should take care of if anything comes aboard.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be looked at.
So you're talking about a whole new ordinance then? By
Well,
spring or summer?
revisions to what we have. I mean, what we're looking at right now is not significantly different than what we already have. We're just trying to clean it up. and make provisions for those new signs and technologies that we know are out there. But, you know, you bring up this thing about the digital signs. I mean, there's a lot of literature in planning circles on the benefits or drawbacks of digital signage, and how often do they change their intensity, all kinds of things to look into. And rather than try to come up with something on the fly, we would just like the opportunity to really study the issue in that sense. So.
But this also, though, gets you to where you can't really study it either. You have to automatically turn it down.
Well, that's kind of what the intent is at this point, is to not get us into that situation where we have to make interpretations on what's already there. So
I think it would actually give them time to study it as well, but it would have an appeal process, go through the BZA, and to be looked at. Right now, it's just you can't approve them, or there's nothing
Right
there.
now, you do, you
They're
can't
automatically
disapprove
approved,
them, yeah.
right?
If we amend this, then how long would it take us if this turned out to be problematic to undo what we're doing? We could do that in,
I mean, basically, I'm planning to bring this to I'm planning on bringing this to the county commission on the 17th of December. I mean, so we have the meeting today. 3 weeks later, we could have it amended out. So, and like I said, we're not getting a barrage of signs brought up to our office. It's just knowing that the potential exists. We just thought this would be out of abundance of caution to bring this forward.
Motion to approve.
But we have to have a public hearing
We
first.
need to
Oh, I thought
conduct
we
a
did
public
that.
hearing. No, we will. All right, sorry. Want to open a public hearing for the proposed amendment to Article 20, which is the signs. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, or speak in general, you're welcome to do that now. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Now we're ready.
I've got a question
Sure.
for staff.
Will?
Did we send, I know it's been a pretty hot topic for the city and several businesses in town, gas station type businesses and the billboard people. Did we send letters specifically or notify any of those stakeholders about this public hearing we just had? Because we didn't have a person show up, and they may have missed it if it was just in the paper. Or did we try and identify some of the people that are involved in that and let them know?
We did not. I mean, we did our normal advertising for it. Now, quite frankly, what I figured would happen is when we get to the point of crafting the regulations, we would include those folks.
I just
But
want to make sure they
at this,
do have a voice.
right, because really at this point, nothing, as far as what they're permitted to do now, nothing's changing. You know, even with this, if this goes through, they're still permitted to do what they were permitted to do before. That's not, we're not changing any of that. All we're saying is if there's a sign in here that's specifically not mentioned, then there's no regulations. We're going to exclude it until we're able to study. And this isn't something that we've looked at other sign regulations. This statement is not just something we came up with. I mean, we've seen this in other sign regulations. This isn't just local to ours. So, but yeah, I mean, just hopefully that'll help with your comfort level with this. What they're permitted to do today, they'd be permitted to do when this goes through.
Well,
So.
I mean, out at Buchanan exit, the Love's truck stop, they've got a digital
Right.
fuel price sign. And now, is it a gray area that just was not prohibited before, or is that expressly permitted in our sign ordinance? Could a company come next door and do the same thing tomorrow if we pass this without going to the BZA?
The interpretation that was granted under the former director, Mr. Davis, was that since it wasn't flashing or blinking, and he said that was acceptable, so he was okay with that. I kind of have a little different view on it than he does regarding the digital part of that. I would think we need to look into it a little more, quite frankly. Of course, now that he has that sign up there, he's approved. He's fine to change out his gas prices and do whatever he's doing. You know, that's, even if this goes through, that's not going to change.
I know he's
right?
already there. Now I'm talking about the next guy.
Now,
in
the
the
next
door.
person that comes through, I mean, my personal feeling on that, my interpretation would be that is a digital sign. It really isn't regulated, and that we need to come up with some regulations and study that some more. So that's,
Even if they came in, the guy next door builds something, they came in and you said, no, we do not permit this at this point, they could still go to the BZA, right?
well, they could appeal the decision based on whatever decision I made and the criteria that I used. They could appeal it and say I was wrong. And if the BZA agrees with him, then they would overturn my decision. If not, they would uphold mine. That's how that would work.
Doug, I have a question. If we stay with the Love's truck stop scenario, and this is passed and they're grandfathered in, if the sign they have now, if it fails, would they be permitted to put it back up if they had to replace it?
Non-conforming sign, it's a little I would say probably they would be in that situation.
Legal non-conforming.
Right, because it's legally established, right? It wasn't an illegal. Now, if it was illegally established, they shouldn't have had to begin with. But in that situation, we probably would have to allow them to put it back up.
Hey, Doug, now Love's truck stop is a little bit different. Did they not have to go through the city standards when they were out of?
Well, they should have. I mean, since they have the sewer, they should have gone through the city.
So it has standards. It has to go by through the city of Murfreesboro because of an out-of-city sewer customer.
I didn't think the city of Murfreesboro allowed to digitally change signs.
I don't know about that. I'm just saying
That sign may be off-site.
No, as far as I think it's on. I think it's on their property. Yeah, I think it's on their property, as I remember.
But there are some standards that Love had to go by.
Yeah.
Not saying it's a sign, but because of the sewer.
Yeah, they've got to meet city. That's why they had to do curb and gutter out there.
Right.
And different
Plus, the message center billboard is what opened up this whole can of worms.
Right.
It's really the digital change price sign for gas really wasn't an issue until it does. If you're watching it and the price does change, that one time a day, I think it is going to change, but it's not a
And you may not even notice it when it
flashing,
does.
blinking,
Yeah.
undulating, type sign of what you normally see or what's on the billboard out there that's in question or has been in question. I think what this is, it just puts it in black and white that if it's not expressed in the sign ordinance, it's prohibited. And you're never going to have an ironclad sign ordinance or any ordinance for that matter. So you're going to have issues to pop up. When they do, you've got boards and appeal processes to adjust those, and that's why we're here. So I don't have a problem with it, and plus you're going to be getting something done. We may not even have one application between then and then as far as adopting any additions to the sign order. So I make a motion to approve this request.
Second motion and a second. Other discussion? Healthy discussion?
A lot of ordinances start off or end with that very same thing right there.
Like Steve said, my biggest thing was as long as they got an appeal process, they can go through where we're not automatically shutting somebody down where they can't appeal it. And it's in there, so that's where I'm okay with it.
Other discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? I'm sorry?
No, one.
The record show. Have one, okay. Motion carries. Looks like item 13, Director's Report. Discussion on proposed landscaping regulations.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. You recall at the last day meeting, we presented some, Ms. Emsley presented a presentation regarding the work we've done on the proposed landscaping regulations. We gave them to you and asked you to look them over for the next few weeks, and that we would have a work session day to discuss those further. With that, we don't have a formal presentation today, but we're just kind of opening it up for discussion at this point. And Elizabeth has some comments to.
Yeah, I just want to highlight what you have in your packet in front of you. Of course, you have the regulations that I presented to you last month, and then you have a letter from Mr. Huddleston. He sent to us his comments on the regulations. He wasn't going to be able to be here today, so that's in there as well. And then we did sit down with some of our peers, and they had some additional comments. There's a memo to that effect at the end, that some additional changes they recommended. And you asked me last month about how much a landscape architect and a certified arborist would cost. I did a little research. Certified arborist will cost somewhere between the range of $85 to $150 per hour, and that really depends on the size of the site. So if you have a ginormous site, then maybe they will decrease the cost because you're going to be employing them for so long. Just depends on the arborist as well, because that was a range. I called several different ones, and that's the range I got, 85 to 150. The landscape architect, also a range. They guessed about, for an acre site, it'd probably be about $1,500 to $2,000 for their services. Now that once again depended on the size of the site. It also depended on were they also doing the engineering work, because if they were doing that as well, that might decrease the landscape architect fee. So those are just some figures I found. And as Doug said, this is just a discussion session, a work session for any changes you'd like to see made to it, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Did you mention the letters?
Yeah.
Did you mention the thing from Huddleston?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You mentioned, Elizabeth, you mentioned a letter from Huddleston Steel and a couple of other comments. Could you kind of run through those and kind of highlight those for us? If you would,
Sure,
please?
no problem. The letter from Mr. Huddleston, I believe he didn't feel that a landscape architect would be required for every site. So that was his comments he wanted in there. And we actually sent out these amendments to all the surveyors and engineers in town. There might be some in the audience, I'm not sure, who want to speak to it. I can open it up later if there is. The peer comments I'm talking about, we sat down with the City of Murfreesboro's Urban Environmentalist Department, and they deal with landscaping every day in the City of Murfreesboro, and they recommended some changes. First thing they recommended was in the applicability section. They said that if we have a section that basically if you're renovating a place, then you have to bring it up to full standards if you have more than 50% of the value. In our regulations, we went ahead and said including land, and they said that if you include land, no one will ever meet that provision because the renovation will never equal more than 50%. So that basically nullifies that provision. So they recommended deleting the including land section. In the definition section, they also recommended deleting the diameter at breast height and just sticking with caliber. They said diameter at breast height was more of not so much a landscape architect phrase, more of an arborist phrase. And they recommended just sticking with caliber as the sole definition of trees. For the tree ornamental, they recommended lowering the height to 25 feet, being that often ornamentals are planted under power lines and 35 feet can get to where it's a problem. And then versus that, they would also increase the shade or canopy to 25 feet or above. So that would change that as well. As for the landscaping plan requirements, they said that if we were going to require a landscape architect, another option may be to require it for large sites. Currently, we required it based on parking spots, and we did set that at 10. They said that maybe 3-acre sites or more might be a better requirement or a different requirement to set it at. Let's see. They wanted to make sure that we established shrub heights in the for the parking areas. The shrubs within the buffer yard have to be 6 feet at mature height. For the parking areas, we didn't establish a mature height, so they recommended establishing one 3 to 4 feet. Let's see. What else did they do? Oh, they also believed that the separation, we have in their minimum separation of 10 feet. They felt that might be too small, that the trees would need to be spaced further out to make up for their natural canopy at full height. So they recommended 25 feet for ornamentals and 40 to 50 feet for canopy trees. Let's see, they also wanted to decrease the tree height or the plant height within the site triangle just to make sure that everyone would be able to see and be safe. They had some issues with the mixture of plants that we had recommended. They felt that by requiring that many different species of plants, which we did to, prevent disease from taking out the entire landscaping, that you might have some problems with consistency in design. So they felt that a percentage might be a different way to handle that. These are, of course, all just recommendations. Now, the buffer yard requirements, you remember the planting table that shows you how much buffer material has to be in each buffer yard. Our committee was fine with this. This is what they recommended. However, they felt that might not be a proper screen once it's planted. They felt that there might need to be more plant material in there to create an opaque screen, especially on the type 3 buffer. So that's a different look on it. Our committee felt that space was more important than plants. They wanted to make sure that all the plants had enough room to grow and live. At the same time, the flip side of that is, if a neighbor next door is wanting a buffer and it's going to be years before that buffer is going to be dense, they felt that maybe we might need to put some more plant material within that buffer to create a more opaque screen sooner. Let's see. Oh, they had a little confusion over the parking area and vehicular use area. They wanted to clarify how the plant material was required. They also recommended that we make sure, maybe put in some description in there about mulch, describe what mulch is and what we mean by it, because apparently there's wide variety of mulch, and you want to see more natural material, and you want to make sure it's installed properly. They also wanted to make sure it didn't conflict with lighting plans. They said oftentimes in site plans you'll see that the light pole is going to be in the landscape bed, which is fine, but you just need to coordinate what tree is in that bed to make sure it's not going to grow into the light pole. They also had some comments on the perimeter landscaping. They wanted to see currently there's a statement in there that says that the parking area must be at least 8 feet away from property lines and or adjacent right-of-way. They wanted to see that described as green space, just to clarify what that was, because you don't necessarily have to plant anything there, it just has to be a separation. So that was their suggestion. They also said the committee really did want to see more like natural beds clustered together as opposed to really long rows of bushes. So they said that it might be a better way to define that, call them defined beds. That might help engineers picture it when they're trying to draw the site plan. On the tree credits chart, they wanted to see, back to that diameter at breast height, they recommend changing that to caliber there as well. And then when you get to the installation and enforcement, we have bonding requirements in there currently, and they recommended, suggest adding language that forfeited the bond after 14 months. It would be forfeited, and we could collect the money and I guess figure out if we were going to install landscaping or plant trees somewhere else. But they said it was important to make sure we put in the word forfeited, so that the owner understood. They also said it was important to make sure that the bond was under the owner's name, not under a contractor or under a leasing. Make sure that the owner of the property was the one that held the bond. Let's see. That was the main drift of their comments that they had for us the other day. So.
We're going to try to attack this and approve it next month.
We don't have to. This is just a work session to discuss any comments you might have had over the last month. But if
attack is a good word, but no.
Of course, we can bring it up next month in the meeting. It's just kind of how comfortable you feel with it, or if you'd like to see more changes made, or if you'd like to see some of these recommended changes worked into it, and see the words on that.
Yeah, at this point, what we would bring forward would be the document as it exists. Now, if you'd like to see some changes in there, of course, we're more than willing to listen and to make changes as needed. But that's kind of what we're wanting at this point, is your guidance as to what you're comfortable with, what you're not, and why, and whatnot.
The recommendation that Bill Huddleston made, have you already put that into the document, or is that not in the document?
No, it's not in the document currently. We just included his letter in the packet.
But again, that's why we're having this session, right? I mean, they've looked it over, they've made their suggestions, and as a commission, it's up to you at this point to either ask us to make changes or to move it forward as is to to a public hearing, and then from that from that point, it'd go to the full board of commissioners.
So his recommendation is less stringent than what our recommendation is. Is that what the document says? Is that correct?
Yeah, with the ordinance the draft amendment that came out of the committee, the committee really felt strongly about including a landscape architect as a requirement for the landscaping. We tried to put in, only if there's 10 parking spaces or greater, as a little bit of a cushion, so that the smallest shop wouldn't necessarily have it. I did some research on the number of parking spaces over the last year and the various site plans we've seen. They're across the board, honestly. We have, plans that we're putting in 100 parking spots and plans that we're putting in like 4. So they're really across the board, and you do see it span. But that's where we tried to set that marker as at 10 parking spots required. Once again, we got recommendations that maybe setting it at an acreage might be a better trend. The one that we feel is really important as staff is that, we have a section in there for alternative methods of compliance when the site can't be brought up to the normal compliance due to it being limestone rock underneath and no soil. Those type of conditions, we would like to see a landscape architect at that point because we're asking them to do something innovative and different that would also fulfill the requirements of the ordinance without meeting it to the T. Staff would really like to keep that requirement, that the landscape architect be required if there's an alternative method of compliance applied for. But the rest of it is, still open to debate.
Elizabeth, have you run the recommendations past the committee members and gotten any feedback from them?
No, we have not at this time, but we can. We still have all their email information and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that might be a good idea to have their feedback, and, since they studied it and, what their reaction to it is. And then the other question I had is on the, when you talk about if something should happen and they would end up forfeiting their bond, is there somewhere in here where it talks about that does not alleviate them from their responsibility for maintenance?
It doesn't specifically say that, but that would probably be a good addition. That was actually one of the discussion points we had with the city officials when they were here. Basically, that you're right. They forfeit their bond. That doesn't excuse them from doing the landscaping, and then they're subject to zoning enforcement.
Right.
So.
And they have a slightly different situation. The city, of course, maintains a tree bank, which is a fund where they plant trees on city-owned property. And so they actually, if they forfeit the bond, it goes into that tree bank. We, of course, don't have that type of fund. We'd have to look into, what would we do with those forfeited funds? Would we install the landscaping? Would we put them somewhere else? That would be something we need to research some more.
Yeah, I'd like to know that. I'd like to know what the plan for that is.
Mr. Chairman, would it be unreasonable to ask the 3 civil engineers in the audience as to the pros and cons of Mr. Huddleston's statement about having a civil engineer as well as if they feel qualified to answer, would that be unrealistic to ask that question to them since they're here?
No, it's not unrealistic. Would a different alternative be to have them address the committee again and let the committee consider all of these changes and come back to us with a recommendation?
Well,
you want to hear from the other guys?
The other guys being
civil engineers.
Yeah, I would just like to hear why they think it would be okay to have both.
Okay.
As opposed to staff's one. So.
That's fine. I think for the belts and suspenders approach, just have a suspension of the rules, and I think that'd be fine.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and allow those 3 people to speak.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mike, invite him up.
Well, yeah.
They may not want to speak.
Be ease over there.
I'm going to defer to Bill because I've got to leave.
That was very political of you.
We appreciate you being here, though.
Now he's gone, too.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I appreciate you letting me speak. This is something that has come up in the past in other jurisdictions.
Bill, if you would, just tell us who you are for the record.
My name is Cy Weiser. I'm building a big house out on Pitts Lane. I'm Bill Huddleston, president of Huddleston Steel Engineering. And a lot of what we do, a lot of site plans that we send to y'all for commercial developments, we aren't working for big entities that develop Walmarts and food lines and that sort of thing. A lot of the site plans that we submit to you are for very small businesses. Usually it's for the business owner, and he may not have too many employees, and to ask him to spend the money for a landscape architect, we feel like is overkill for these smaller type operations. Civil engineers and are licensed to do this kind of work. If it gets too extravagant, we bring a landscape architect on board, and that's what I would do if necessary to submit things to you. But to ask a landscape architect to work on all the sites that we do, especially these small ones. I mean, a lot of these folks we work for have trouble even getting the money up to pay us. And a landscape plan is going to cost more than the site plans that we do for you. It's not, also, it doesn't make sense really to require a landscape architect if you don't have one reviewing the plans. I just don't see that it's necessary in that regard. If I've got a landscape architect, he's not going to be able to, he may get too extravagant for even you to review and or comment on. But these are this is the main reason, and it may be as a compromise you come up with a area of disturbance. If we're not disturbing more than an acre or two, maybe the civil engineer could do the landscape plans in that regard. Also, landscape architects can be brought on to identify trees if that's necessary. If we're talking about identifying trees and whether they're going to be viable or not, then a landscape architect may be appropriate for that situation. Be happy to answer any questions.
That's kind of where I was heading a while ago when I was asking which one is more stringent than the other, and it sounds like to me the example that Bill is using right now is less stringent than what we're actually setting forth in our document.
Right, that's correct.
And I think for the small business person, it's going to be a little less expensive on that person by doing it Bill's way than it would be. And I understand why y'all are wanting this. We don't have anybody on staff.
Right.
But if we set up something where the amount of disturbance of the land is set up, that will kick in to the belts and suspenders way that Doug was talking about, where it will, if it's big enough, it'll justify it. So.
Any other questions for Mr. Huddleston?
At what size, Bill, would you recommend? 2 acres, 3 acres? I mean,
well, it's hard to say. A lot of what we bring to you, they may have 5 acres, but they're only putting their shop or whatever on an acre max. So if we set an area of disturbance of 1.5 acres or something, that'd probably be enough.
10 spaces.
Could you leave the parking spaces in if it meets either one of them? You know, if you got 10 or less parking spaces, then y'all can do it. Or if it meets the criteria, maybe 2 acres.
10 parking spaces would be required for anything of a 3,000 square foot building. That's pretty small. I mean, I might say a 5,000 or 10,000 square foot building might kick it in. That's a good, that'd be a good thing to look at, though. Not only designate the disturbance size, but designate a building size as well that kicks it in.
I mean, my approach is that you could have a rather large building with a few number of a few number of employees, and it's maybe
right
out in some of that stuff we've done around Buchanan kind of, to me, is fitting that criteria,
Right.
Not many employees, but a rather large building. Y'all could do the landscaping for that because it's more of an industrial area, or very high use commercial.
Right. It'd be hard to pick a number right here, standing here today. Maybe we could get together and decide on some criteria.
What if, I think Ron or someone brought up a good point. Maybe if the committee members that are on this committee, I think someone like Bill or someone could meet with them and kind of give some of this advice, and maybe the committee can come back with some other alternative. Be all right.
Right. I'm sure we could pull the committee together again. It'd likely be January, just the holidays coming up for their sake, but that wouldn't be a problem at all.
Well, I think from what I'm picking up, at least from my point of view, is you want a common sense regulation on these smaller operations where staff and the engineers can work together and not put an undue burden on the on the cost of opening a new business or something.
That's the problem we were having, trying to, figure out what is small and what, so, like Elizabeth said.
Size and employees or traffic count both may be just disturbance size. I like that.
Any other questions for Mr. Huddleston? Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else in the audience who would like to address the proposed ordinance? Okay, we're going to come back. What if we did that, you guys? Let me just throw this out there that the proposed amendments, we asked for input, we've got it. Let the committee reconvene and consider some of these and come back with an updated recommendation.
Yeah.
If we can do that in January, we'll be fine with that. Does that make a certain amount of sense?
That should be fine.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Okay.
It's good. It's really good discussion, though, and we asked for input and we got it. And as we were reading through these things, a lot of it made sense. You know, it made a certain amount of sense. So let's take it back to the committee and let them consider it and see if we can make some adjustments to it. Okay. Anything else?
Just a couple of announcements regarding our holiday dinner coming up here at I guess that's the 14th of December Planning Commission meeting. That'll be an evening meeting. At this point, we don't have any zoning applications, but we're also going to be looking at plats and plans at that meeting. We won't know about that one until this coming Monday. That'll be the deadline for that. But in absence of any zoning changes, we probably will have the meeting in this room, just so you know. We'll let you know for sure at that time before the meeting date. Gail had passed me a little note earlier in the meeting, just wanting to remind the commissioners to let her know what you're wanting to bring to the dinner. That way we can kind of coordinate. Not everybody shows up with green bean casserole or something like that. So just let Gail know what it is that you're wanting to bring. One other announcement, and she'll probably kill me when she finds out I did this, but one of our planners in our office, Danielle Glauner, recently took the AICP exam, which is the American Institute of Certified Planners. She studied very, very diligently for this exam. She took it last Tuesday, I believe it was, and she did pass. So she is a certified planner now. Now they don't, there's not a quote-unquote official until next year sometime, but she did pass the exam, and we're very proud and happy for her that she did. I just wanted to pass that along. So that's pretty much all I have.
Engineers report?
Hostel Pine, we'll give you an update on it. They're just about finished out there. They've been working with MTSU's concrete department, and they're helping. It's totally separate from the contract, but they have are installing a sidewalk out there. MTSU is, with the help of their concrete department. But it should be. If you ain't got a chance to go out there and ride, it's been a real big improvement.
Yeah, it's a good look.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Any other business to come before the committee? Once again, our next meeting will be on Monday evening at 6 o'clock on the 14th of December. And after our meeting, before our meeting, we'll enjoy some call it a holiday, but it's our Christmas dinner, okay?
Mm-hmm.
5, we'll eat at 5.
Yeah, well, we had 5, and then we'll just, again, it looks like it'll be in this room, but yeah, that way we'll just kind of eat up there, down there, whatever, and then we'll just come down here.
Welcome again, Vincent, to our meeting. It's a pleasure to have you aboard, and looking for great things out of you. Anything else?